In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, Paul talks about a measure of faith that God has dealt to every man. Is that measure of faith that's given to every man given to him at birth? Is it an equal measure? That measure of faith grow or diminish?
All right. Romans chapter 12, verse 3. And it's a good question, and the answer to that question is that some people have more faith than others. You can develop the faith you got, but some have more than others. Romans 12:3, for I say through the grace given to me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. Well, that thing there implies that certain people have more faith than other people, and the passage right there, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, and 9, he began to talk about gifts. There's no doubt in my mind that all some Christians naturally have more faith than others. There's no doubt in my mind about it all. There's no doubt in my mind that faith can be developed. Romans chapter 10, verse 17, faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. The more you exercise your faith, the more faith you'll get. But I take the passage to mean exactly what it says, that some Christians have more faith than others. I'll go further than that. Some Christians have more grace than others. Now, as to whether or not any more is available, the Bible said, let us come bold to the throne of grace to obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need, implying the grace is available. But not every man has it. For example, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth liberty all. Some of them don't have much wisdom as others. I am certain from watching Christians through the years that some Christians just naturally have more faith than others. I'm certain of it. I've seen it demonstrated. Our personal testimony, I never had very much faith. A whole lot of faith. Never have. That's the reason why I've never launched anything big. I don't have big concepts. I think little. You know what? I think it's from being raised in the Depression. The real Depression.
Amen.
Of this stuff they talk about, recession, all that kid stuff, man. You ought to come up in 29, man. Oh, brother. I mean, nobody had any money, man. You couldn't, 20 cents an hour was tough, big wages, 20 cents an hour. You have a football and play on the football and go flat on you, and you couldn't get it pumped because you had no air pump. You couldn't buy a valve. We'd stuff them full of socks. You have never punted, do you? Punted a football full of socks. Boom. I see these kids out playing. They're playing Little League ball and pony ball, all this Little League, pony league stuff. They got to have $40 gloves, you know, and $800 uniform, all this junk. We played, sometimes we didn't have bases. We used a croquet sack for a bake or somebody's school book. I made a good base. And sometime when we didn't have anything, we'd have a tree. And you have never played baseball, you slid into second base when it was a tree. And coming up in I was born in 21. And when I was 8 years old, the bottom dropped out. When I was 18, the war broke out. I never got my feet off the ground, man. I never got going. And coming up around through 29, 30, and 31, every morning, mush for breakfast. Mush, oatmeal. I cannot look a bowl of oatmeal in the face, man. I'd rather eat dirt. I'd rather eat the rug. I'd chew on a sheet, man. Just oatmeal every day for breakfast. No toast, no butter, no sausage, no pancakes, no bacon. Mush. Except in Alaska, don't they? Mush. I just thought of something I heard the other day about how they handle the kid. They use whale blubber to keep the kid straight in Alaska. When the kid steps out of line, they whale him till he blubbers. I believe that's what it was. Oh, we had this mush. And come there, we had nothing. And you know, it's such a shock that you never get over it. Your daddy going down the bank to get out his savings, and no savings there. And I've been saved now for 36 years, and I have never outlived the Depression. If I think about a big project, having faith to build this big school, this big church, buy all this land, my faith just goes like that. I remember what happened last time. And I'll tell you something else is going to happen again, too. I mean, all this stuff, 3 trillion, 4 trillion. You don't go in debt forever. After a while, you hit the bottom and break your skull, man. Why, if some of you carry on your private business like the government carries on it, they'll have you in jail. One day you go to the bank and say, where's my money? And they'll give it back to you, and they'll give you back 10 cents on a dollar.
Amen.
You'll have $100 back in there, and they'll give you back $10. The rest is gone. So my faith has never been very much. And if I had faith like some of the brethren do, I'm sure there are different degrees. I would have a lot bigger work than what I have. Now, I'll tell you a guy who's got faith. It's Jerry Falwell. That bird's got faith. I don't know what his budget is. I think it's $16 million a year. Something like that. Brother Gray stepped out faith down there in Jacksonville and borrowed a couple $1 million. I think his interest was $1,000 a day there for a while. I can't take that step. I haven't got that kind of faith. To me, that's presumption. Amen. And that, just to think about that just makes me, just rattles me. I don't want to go to bed tonight, man, go up tomorrow morning knowing I've got $1,000 I got to get in as interest before the principal's paid on. I'd have bleeding ulcers, man, all the time. I'm sure some have more faith than others, and I'm sure it's usually the dumber saints that have more faith. That's right. Now, I don't mean that. I don't mean that way. I don't mean that they don't have any brains. I mean, they don't have no education. There's a difference, you know. If you ain't got no education, you just got to use your brains. I've observed the simple-minded saints usually have more faith than the other ones. I'll tell you why it is. I got saved, went up to Bob Jones. I hadn't been there a year, but I got a letter from the government. And it said, if you want to keep your reserve commission, sign this thing and send it back. You keep your reserve commission in the infantry, subject to call at any time in case of a national emergency. Or if you don't sign this thing, you lose your commission and your discharge, subject to being drafted in case of a national emergency. That was 50. That's the Korean War. Well, I thought I'd been called to preach. I took it to old man Bob Jones. I said, what am I going to do about this? He said, if I sign this thing, call me up, ministry's gone. I said, if I don't sign it, then I'll lose my commission. I might get drafted back in as a private, lose my commission, go back in a rifle company, start all over again. And I'll never forget that old man. While I was talking, he was going. And I got to know him after that. He was praying. Yes, the guy questioned. He starts praying. I know that because I picked up a habit. You ask me questions sometime, I'll say, would you repeat that? And when I say, would you repeat that, I'm praying for God to get me out of the mess I'm in. And so he goes like this. He says, well, he said, you afraid to go back in the army? I said, no, I'm not afraid. He said, you know you could witness back there and win the souls to Christ there? I said, yeah, I know I could. He said, well, you could have a ministry there as well as any place else. I said, yeah. And he said, but you'd rather be out? I said, you'd rather be out? He looked at me a minute and he said, don't sign it. Just like that. I've been sweating that thing out for a week. Told that bird, 5 seconds, don't sign it. I didn't sign it. I lost my commission, got my discharge, emergency didn't come up, I never saw the army again. Now, you know what that comes from? That comes from a simple mind that sees two alternatives. And that's one of the deadliest things about education there is. Generally speaking, the more education, the less faith. I'll tell you what it is. When a problem comes up, you think, now if I do this, then this will react this way, unless it reacts this way. Of course, I have seen it react this way. The smarter you are, the more you can remember, the more you can get the stuff together. You say, well, if I do this, then that'll happen, unless this happens, and that happens. But if that happens, then this should happen. And if that happens, and the first thing you know, you can't make any decision. So much stuff clutters up your mind. Oh, where I am, man. You don't do nothing. To be ignorant's a real blessing. Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, he says, if ignorance is bliss, I'm a blizzard. I envy some of those folks in Alabama. You know, down the coast where I am, they talk fast, but in the Black Belt, you see a guy who'll say, well, hello there, Brother Pete. How you doing? Sure is a nice day today, ain't it? Well, why don't you come up and sit down for a while? You sit down. Had a pretty good cotton crop last year. Fish ain't biting too good. Every 5 minutes a thought goes through there, you know. And gets out before it dies of loneliness. And you know, those kind of people can usually stand more trial and tribulation than the educated folks can. Because the mind's simple. The mind just says, well, if I do that, I reckon that'll happen. If I do that, I reckon that'll happen. I don't know which is going to happen, so I might as well take one, I'll take that one. And do it. So I'd say the answer to your question is, yeah, God does deal with them with a different measure of faith, and it's up to us to increase what faith we have. Yes, sir. Nothing like a Bible to clear up a college education.